Cold open question of the day, my man, Brendon Kleen. We had, I think, a good conversation last episode coming off the heels of the All-Star game about the faces of the league, players caring what that means, and I think broadly generating fan interest in the league to some degree. So if you were to pick a player right now to show to your friend who's interested in basketball, interested in the NBA, but you're trying to get them more invested in a player and maybe thus the league, who would you send your player to? What YouTube rabbit hole are you sending your friend down?
I'm usually not this way, but I think in this case I kind of have to be a homer and say Devin Booker.
Make the case.
I feel like Book he's a throwback player, right? I think that he stylistically, if you know you like basketball, you're going to like his game. And he has, the Nike shoe that just came out. He's kind of out there, publicly involved in different things, buddies with Drake, going to different games, pretty active on social media enough. I think if the Suns can maybe, get a little further in the playoffs, be a mainstay deep in, conference finals every year for the rest of his prime, he's going to have as good a shot as anybody to be kind of on that list of guys we think of as, hey, they're drawing people in.
I like that answer. Mine came down to 3 for me. The 2 that I didn't pick, well, really 4. 3 that I didn't pick and 1 that I did pick. And the one that I did pick, I'm gonna expect some pushback, but that's okay. Giannis was on my list because he's just a good personality. He does in-depth interviews with his local media, which one came out on Wednesdays before we recorded this. I had Luka on that list because Luka is just an absurdly fun player. And then I had Jokic because he's going to be around for a long time in a big way. I think you could go Wembanyama in some other ways. My answer is Tyrese Haliburton because I think he's like video game fun, but he also has a personality that I think people can just buy into, and he doesn't take himself too seriously, but he takes the game seriously at the same time. I don't think there's been a more fun player game to game this year, Brendan, than Tyrese Haliburton. He's top 5. Fun to most fun. Can you say
I
that?
think since the NBA Cup he's been pretty hurt and inconsistent. But I hear you. You had me for 2 months, but unfortunately there's been 6 weeks since then.
He also just threw the ball off the backboard and then did an assist off it. I'm sorry. And also just the personality does matter here. There are guys you could pick. Ant would have been on this list. I think he would have been a reasonable case. But Ant's out here being the All-Star game's not serious. I kind of just want to.
So liking the All-Star game is a prerequisite for this?
You kind of pilled me on caring about the All-Star game, Brendan. Not gonna lie, you won.
Okay,
congratulations.
Ant would have been second on my list, so I'm definitely not out on him just because he said something goofy. I hear you. I like Haliburton. I like the pick. I'm just making you flesh it out here. But that is look, we talked with Rob Mahoney early in the season when he wrote a big feature on Haliburton pretty early on, and one of the things they were betting on is that Hallie could become one of the types of guys in this league that attracts talent. And it sounds like Pascal Siakam said no to the Sacramento Kings, but somehow was down to extend, or he hasn't extended yet, but spend the next several years of his career in Indianapolis. And I think the main reason why is Tyrese Haliburton. So he has that type of magnetism. I think you're absolutely right.
I think he's also just the health thing is fair, but you need to pick someone who I think is fun, and the way they play is fun. And there's certain guys that are great, but would we say that that there's certain guys that it's Giannis is incredible, but is he always the most fun to watch game to game? I think sometimes no. Dame was another one I thought about, but is he too old at this point to be the guy you want to anchor yourself to? But he's absurdly fun.
The answer to that is yes.
Okay. Respect for my 30 and ups out here. All right, coming up on today's show, we're past the All-Star break. 10 things that are going to decide the rest of the year. Let's dive in.
Oh, a spectacular move by Michael Jordan.
Welcome in to the Just Basketball Show. I am Chris Manning. That is Brendon Kleen. If you haven't already, subscribe, rate, review on your podcast app and your platform of choice. Follow us on YouTube. Subscribe there. Hit the notification bell. 5-star reviews only, by the way. I want to tell you about our friends at Thrive Fantasy as well. Thrive Fantasy is a player prop DFS platform where you can pick more or less on your favorite players across multiple sports, including the NBA and the NFL. Sign up today with code JustBasketball, and Thrive will match your first deposit up to $250. Today's show is all about the stretch run of the NBA season and getting you ready for these different things. We each have 5. We're going to present them. Brendon, I got to tell you, you put your list in the doc. I had not had a chance to type mine in there yet, so that's just on me. Got to tell you, you were worried about overlap. We have only 2 slight overlaps. Well, 3 slight overlaps. We didn't word anything the same, which is very exciting.
Great.
We didn't
We just diving right in. Who are we starting with?
Yeah.
Who gets the honor?
I want to start with me. I'm going to be selfish, and I'm just going to ask. It's one related to one you have as well. Does anyone get an MVP moment the rest of the way? Does anyone do something on a big stage and put themselves into the MVP race in some way, or put themselves at the forefront of the MVP race? Does someone have a Russell Westbrook's the year he won the MVP moment that separates themselves, and maybe ultimately the nerds and us and other people will say hey, Kawhi Leonard should have gotten MVP, or James Harden should have won MVP, and there's going to be valid cases I think at the end of the year for a bunch of guys for MVP, Brendon. But does someone have a moment for MVP that separates them from the rest of the pack? I think it's possible that that's in some way how this race is going to get decided.
It could be. I think the standings will probably dictate that more than anything personally. I think in this time in the NBA, that Russ MVP is a good example of something that if a player were to do it, I think would really stand out. Maybe Jokic is the closest to what Russ was then, just in terms of consistency on a night-to-night basis and late game, I'm getting the job done types of what you just called MVP moments. But I just think with the level of parity we have now, and obviously that Russ team wasn't elite, so maybe that, makes it somewhat similar to how we are now. But
he also, I also think he had it's the word I'm about to use is not the exact right word, and it's kind of a loaded word, but he kind of had a populist groundswell of support from fans, it felt based on how arenas were reacting to him that year.
Yeah, but it was because of those. It was because of those moments. It was because of those clutch situations, right? Isn't that what you're saying?
But I think it also built that year. It was it built up to him getting these moments in other markets where he normally would be maybe praised because he's a star and loved because he's a star. But I don't know if he would have gotten the exact same. I think there was a special set of circumstances that kind of built in a crescendo for Russ in a way that I don't know if there's a one-to-one analogy here within the pool of MVP candidates that could get the same kind of thing. I don't think there's anyone that's a character in that way, in the way Russ was when he won his MVP.
Yeah, I honestly, it kind of feels like you are discounting that too much in my professional opinion. That MVP, you're making it seem like he won it because
no, I don't.
Fans geeked out and clapped really hard.
No, that's not what I mean. But what I mean is that I think it helped. I think he had.
It was the first triple-double, right? It was the first since Oscar Robertson, and the clutch numbers were out of this world, and it was the fact that Durant and Harden were gone. So it wasn't just Durant, all these cool little nights on League Pass.
I know.
Yeah.
I know, but I think they're also I'm saying the component of it was that I don't know if it's one-to-one replicables, even if pick an MVP candidate you want to have that's Jalen Brunson has a run where he scorches the Cavs in Cleveland in a couple weeks and has a 40-10 game against Mitchell, and they get the 2 seed, and that pushes him into the conversation in some way. I think there was just some as great it's it was Russ was great and historic and had these things where it's hey, Durant left and he's like said F you to the world. Like there was part of that I think aided him. Like it just does. And I don't know if that's I'm saying the greatness is there. I'm also saying is there a 1-to-1 thing here, even if I'm saying is there someone who could have a moment in the same way? It's like an open question to me is can that be replicated as far as a vibe and energy?
Looking at the schedule
in Denver, like that was nuts.
To me, it kind of feels like Luka would be, or Brunson. I think those are both two good examples of what could be similar if we're just using that Westbrook year as an example. But I think every year kind of has it, right? I mean, I think Embiid against Jokic in that big Sunday game last year went a long way. The fact that Embiid was able to get the W. I mean, that was a team win. PJ Tucker's defense played a big part in it and everything else, but those things matter. And so Denver and Dallas play each other Sunday, March 17th, ABC, middle of the day game. I would imagine that one would go a long way. I mean, the Mavs have to be a lot better in the win-loss in order to even be in this conversation, but I would expect that one to have some standing here. And again, I think to me it's going to come down to, again, to use the same word, but add an S to it, the standings in the West, especially of really what it looks like. Because, I mean, to me, how surprised would you be if somebody in the East won the MVP?
I'd be pretty surprised because you would think it would need to be Giannis or Tatum would be the two leading candidates, at least as far as the betting market goes, from our friends at BetMGM. Giannis, the Bucks don't feel like they're going to be good enough or stable enough the rest of the way for him to actually get into that conversation and be a legitimate candidate and win it. And then Tatum is just like not really in the conversation, even though Boston, I think, is widely considered the best team in the league and the best team in the conference at the very least.
Yeah, it almost feels like Brunson, if the Knicks were to rise like maybe past Philly, maybe past Milwaukee if the Bucks really fell off.
You mean Cleveland, not Philly. They're already ahead of Philly.
I just mean stay, right? Like finish the season cemented as a top 2 or 3 team in the conference. And yes, Cleveland would have a role to play, although, again, based off the betting odds, Brunson is already a touch ahead of Donovan. I think that conversation might be swayed by the standings too. He feels like probably more likely than Tatum was my point, just because of I think our perception of the Celtics. But do we want to go back and forth, or all of yours then all of mine? Because I have one MVP based question here too.
No, I think we should go back and forth. I think that's the fair way to do it. We'll go back and forth, no snake. And you have an MVP one, so let's get to it. And I have, once you say it, I have an immediate rebuttal for you. So let's go.
Well, my question is, and I intentionally didn't say his name, and I think you strategically helped me out there, which is, is Shai Gilgeous-Alexander really going to win MVP? Because I have started to hear on different, content sources, we'll call them, whether that's social media or shows or podcasts or anything, NBA chatter out there that this feels real. You hear it on broadcasts, and just talking to people at Suns games or wherever in my life that care about the NBA, people are moving in that direction in a way that really, really surprises me. And I believe he is, he's not the betting favorite. Jokic is, but you look at a lot of stats and Shai is right behind Embiid. So he feels like he might be the front runner right now if OKC was able to hold on and finish ahead of Denver in the Western Conference standings. Is this really where we're headed?
My rebuttal to that is is it just going to be Jokic that wins it? Because he's the betting favorite. I think he's widely considered the best player in the world, or at least among a lot of people considered the best player in the world. His team's the defending champ. Mm-hmm. It's kind of just the de facto pick in a year where Embiid, I think, would have been the guy, it felt like, if he hadn't had this issue with the 65 games. That just kind of obviously cut his MVP candidacy short. I feel like Jokic would be if you're going to say, if I had to pick someone right now that just feels like the way this breaks, I feel like it might just be Jokic getting their MVPs in his prime. Best team in the league last year. I think one of the in-ring title contenders. I just think it might just go to him in the same way I think you're maybe saying it might just be for SGA.
Yeah, well, so You look at remaining strength of schedule, right? OKC and Denver are pretty much neck and neck. You look at the net rating with Shai on 10.3 plus 10.3. You look at the net rating with Jokic on plus 8.7. And actually, the offensive rating with either of those two players on the court for their respective teams is basically identical. Shai's is a little higher. I think you can have a pretty interesting conversation about what value really is for a player like Shai on defense because he's not a big man and how much you should even factor that in, frankly. But to me, their cases being very, very close. The Thunder, I think, having the reputation or perception as being younger and kind of needing Shai's consistency and giving them kind of a rudder night to night. The surprise, he was our North Star during this awful rebuild when Durant and Russ and everybody left. That's all on his side. And so if the stats are similar, and let's just say the Thunder are even like a game or two ahead of the Nuggets in the standings when it's all said and done, it'd be kind of weird to vote for Jokic at that point, wouldn't it? I mean, they're literally in the same conference. If one guy beats out the other and the stats and everything else tells you he's at least as valuable, I don't know. I could definitely see it going that way.
I think there is also just a vibe within this race, Brendan, where maybe this is a year where new blood does win it. Just someone who hasn't won it before, someone who tells you where the league is going, someone who tells you who gets rewarded for elevating their team in a real way. And Shai, to me, would be the best candidate for that kind of parameter, right? Because his team is better than Luka. Like, it would be him or Luka that would kind of be the candidate you would think of to me when you think of, okay, who's the next guy that could win an MVP? Shai's team's just better than Luka's by a significant margin. So he, to me, would be the guy if you're going to go that route and say, okay, it's not going to be Jokic, Embiid can't. We're not going to get to Giannis because the Bucks are so uneven. But Shai would be the guy, I think, if you went down the route. I think you're making a strong case.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about it before, right? Too, I think Shai's defense has taken a step forward this year. He creates turnovers, which even if he's not an elite defender, like up there with the best of the best of the best, that is a skill. Leading the league in steals or close to it, that matters. And his ability to just exert control over these games, especially late. And I don't look at the clutch stats every day because they fluctuate a lot, but when I think of the best guys down the stretch of a game, he does come to mind. I was really resistant to this up until recently, but because of Embiid's injury, because the Nuggets are a little lower in the standings, nobody in the East has really cemented themselves. It feels more and more like a realistic possibility. I don't think any of us would have him as the most valuable player in the NBA, but for the award, measuring just this season, he may well snatch it.
It happens sometimes. All right, Brent, I'm going to give you a choice for my next one. Do you want Eastern Conference or Western Conference?
Let's go to the East. We've talked a lot about Western Conference guys with the MVP.
All right, this is, I think, to me, the most important storyline the rest of the way for the East. How does 2 through 4 shake out? How does 2 through 4 between Cleveland, New York, and Milwaukee, how does that actually break? What does the playoff bracket at the top of the conference look like? There's so much, I think, riding on the playoffs for all three of those teams in different ways. I think there's pressure, I think most on the Bucks, but I think also on Cleveland. I think also on the Knicks to maximize what this year is. And all of these teams have, I think, like reasonable cases and expectations or dreams of making the conference finals. I don't think any of them should be considered on the tier of Boston, to be clear. But who gets home court between these teams in rounds 1 and 2? Who is 3, and then A gets home court in the first round, but B does not have to, assuming they win round 1, does not have to then play Boston in round 2. That is such a big deal. And if you're the Bucks, in particular, if you look at it through their lens, there's a good chance to me that, Brendan, that they finish 4th and they're staring down having to win a 4-5, maybe against a returning Joel Embiid. And then if they win that, it's like, okay, you get Boston. there's just so much I think at stake for how this breaks and what's going to be set up for these teams here. For as of right now, for what it's worth, the seeding order as far as the Basketball Reference playoff probability chart goes, based on their simulations, Boston 99.9% of the time gets the 1 seed. Cleveland gets their the 2 seed 88.3% of the time. The Knicks get the 3 seed 32.2% of the time, and the Bucks get the 4 seed 26% of the time. That is the most likely structure of this. And if you're the Bucks, that's worst case scenario.
Yeah, I guess I don't. I think all the Bucks stuff you're saying, I don't really see the same. We just feel negatively about them generally. It's just an aura, right? But they're not really injured right now.
It's just
and
there's just nothing
they made the change, right? Like they got Doc. I understand it hasn't started well, but I think if you were to give me like a stock up, stock down, and we did that type of a segment, I would probably think the Bucks stock has to be up just based on, well, they made a couple changes in the buy. You know, they got Gallinari, they got Beverly. Maybe that just helps steady things out. They have a more regular coach, and they're healthy. So it's like, shouldn't things trend upward for them rather than like we just bet on they're going to win 3 out of every 10 games forever? I don't really think that's going to happen, right?
That's not my point. My point is that this is a team, if you're thinking about a pressure index of the playoffs, they have Giannis in his prime. They have Damian Lillard after they give up everything and Drew Holiday for him. Post 30, you made a coaching change. This is an older team. It's just your season is, I think, more than anybody else in that 2 through 4 range to find out, can you win a title this year?
Yeah,
that is just
what the issue I'm taking is you saying that they're going to finish 4th just because like the vibes are off. They're a game ahead of New York right now, right? And New York is much more injured, so I think that would I kind of would see it as it's going to finish exactly how it is right now. If I had to lock something in, I would go Boston, Cleveland, Milwaukee, New York, just because Cleveland's rolling. They're healthy now. New York is still kind of scuttling around with their injuries. Philly, we don't expect to jump back in. And I do think Milwaukee can kind of stay afloat. So I might just say it goes exactly according to what it is at this exact moment.
I tend to agree with you. I was just going through what like the one simulation you can publicly look at. Teams have their own. There's other sources you can look at. That's what I'm saying is that like it's on the table, and I think there's just a lot at stake for how this actually breaks. That is my point here.
I feel like you said you think the Bucks finish 4th, and then now we're rolling back. But no, that's fine. If we're on the same page, then I think that makes sense. I think the playoff pressure and everything else is a completely different conversation, and I would tend to agree that the Bucks are at the top of that list for me of these 3 teams. I don't know if New York, I wonder how they view it. I think they have to perform well, but if I were to say, to tell Knicks fans, hey, you have another showing like you did last year, would that be good enough? Like a competitive second round exit, or do they have to go further than that if we're talking about, setting themselves up for a playoff run?
I think also, Brennan, what influences me on this is that like the 5 seed is just such a weird thing in the East this year. Like it's just gonna be like, well, like think about like the options you could get at 5. Like you don't really, Philly's kind of like gonna be an unknown. Just I think based on how their season is broken. Does any one of Orlando or Indiana or Miami like figure it out? I also think if to the Knicks' credit, like. I think if any of these teams would feel good about being 4th and just taking on the world, it's probably them. Like, I would feel like they just want to be healthy, and that's kind of the whole thing. Like, I don't think anything else really matters to them.
Yeah, they have Anunoby is out for Thursday. Bogdanovich probable, Hartenstein probable, and then Randall and Robinson both also obviously still out. So this break might have helped them a bit, but they're still a long way from really feeling good about where they are. And similar for Philly, it's not just Embiid, but Melton continues to be out, and Batum's been kind of fluctuating in and out of the lineup over there for them. So, yeah, this time of year, it does tend to just lean toward health, and from there you just go. I'm sure the Knicks would love to have home court in the second round if they could. I mean, they have a real home court advantage in a way that I'm not sure, Milwaukee or Cleveland really do. So that should be a goal, but, best laid plans don't always map out. Let me give you I have a couple that involve the teams we're talking about.
All right.
So can the 76ers salvage the season? Let's go there next.
Okay.
Joel Embiid is going to be reevaluated around March 6th. And they seem to feel like he can be impactful. At the same time, you saw Daryl Morey basically kind of hedge in a couple of interviews coming out of the deadline where he's, and he's obviously always the type to play have his true intentions hidden, right? But seem to indicate, hey, we might not get something with our cap space. This might be our roster. And, what we did at the deadline, don't read too much into that, or maybe do, and maybe we re-sign Buddy Hield. Like they've given themselves this flexibility, but I personally am of the opinion they can't waste, if there's any potential for Embiid to be impactful by the second week of April. They have to roll with that. So can this whole thing get back into the well-oiled machine that we saw in November and December when Embiid was putting up 30 3/4 on a nightly basis and just destroying the league? Can they get even close to that? Because that team, I think a lot of us felt like could really make noise in the East, and now it's just a whole lot of uncertainty.
I mean, there's no team, Brendan, that I think has more error bars in it for me than the 76ers right now, just because you could convince me a bunch of things about Joel Embiid coming back. And that's kind of the whole thing. It's like, yes, they made moves that I think make them set up to be ready to go when Embiid comes back. They didn't sell off any pieces and prioritize cap space even more aggressively. They're obviously still prime for something in the summer in a big way. But this all just hinges, how far this team goes and how dangerous they are in round one does just depend on what Embiid looks like when he gets back. Does he move well? Is he at his peak? How do they even manage him the rest of the year and rev him up over the course of let's say he comes back March 15th, right? Let's just say he gets reevaluated March 8th. He comes back a week or so later. What does the ramp up process look like to keep him healthy until April and then beyond that, in theory, right? There's just so many things that I don't think we can actually project. We just have to wait to see how it unfolds. It makes them entirely. It makes the question you've asked for me. This isn't good podcasting, and I'm readily admitting that. But I have to just I have no idea. But that's really fun to watch as a fan. And for us to figure out, it's absolutely going to be his first game back. I will be glued on, assuming I am home or and don't have something going on. I will be glued to my couch just seeing how he looks because Lord knows.
I appreciated the caveat that you can't watch TV if you're not home. I think Tyrese Maxey to me is the other part of this that is interesting because he has really shown up in the playoffs. He is also ready. I think you would have to say, this season, as much as it was about Embiid dominating and then Embiid getting hurt, it's also been a bona fide explosive breakout for this guy. In his first 2021 run, he was a bench player, but the past 2 years, he has 38 in game one of the Toronto series 2 years ago. That's with Harden on the team. Obviously, Embiid was hurt in that series. 34 in game two of the second round. Last season has 5 games of 25 plus points across 11 games in the playoffs and has a 60+% true shooting. So in 2 years ago and then 55 last year. And, this season picked up right where he left off. And, again, 20 points per game, upped his 3-point shooting, never turns the ball over. And assists are almost double. this guy is a star in his own right, just made an all-star team. So that part of the equation, I think, is also important, right? You got to keep developing and feeling out the rest of this whole roster. And Morey can talk about, well, we may re-sign some of these guys and this and that, but you kind of want to see Batum and Buddy Hield and this version of Maxey and even Kelly Oubre, for all I know, Kyle Lowry, who's now part of this whole thing, rather than just going into the summer with the same confusion you have right now. So I guess I hope that Embiid can at least be on the court, but to your point, I mean, what he will look like by the time we get there is anybody's guess, and it kind of always is, unfortunately, with this guy. Even if he had never had this meniscus thing, we would have gotten into April being like, how's this going to go? That's just the Joel Embiid experience, so there's really no way to predict and project no matter what, but they got a lot riding on it, so hopefully they can, again, use that same word that I said in the question, salvage this thing.
It makes me nervous for like him, honestly. Like it's just there's no player in the league right now where I have this like palpable fear that things could just like go abruptly wrong in a real way, you know?
It's been 10 years of that feeling, the pit in our stomachs. Yeah, I don't disagree.
Yeah, and he is like, I think, long been number one on the list, Brendon, of guys you just expect to have a playoff moment at some point. And like maybe now I'm just getting to the point where I'm scared that injuries are just going to rob us of him like actually getting to have that.
Yeah, we'll see. I mean, I think it's a good thing, right, that his reevaluation date is a month before even the end of the regular season. So even if he, gets some scans done, whatever, that day or that week, let's say, and he's not fully ready, and there's the ramp up and everything else, and maybe he doesn't even play the rest of the regular season. I think the point you made about the rest of the East outside of the top 5 being a little uncertain, obviously he's probably going to have to play another one of those top 5 at this point in that first round, but that helps him, as does the fact that, it's not like he's Tyrese Maxey, who is doing this largely for the first time as a lead dog. Embiid, it's like he could step onto the court in game 1, and if there's no minutes limits and he's been in practice and everything for weeks, I'm going to feel relatively comfortable with that. But yeah, the re-injury question and everything else is always going to be there. But what is your next question here?
Mine's another salvage project. I'm gonna just keep with the theme here of can we fix him? Can we fix them?
Mm-hmm.
Can the Miami Heat be saved? I want to tease. This is kind of a tease for next week because we're gonna have I'm gonna have Wes Goldberg on. Brennan's gonna head across the pond, and Wes Goldberg, our friend from Locked On Heat, who people have hopefully seen and heard on here before, will be on for 2 episodes next week, and we're gonna do an East deep dive and talk about the Heat. But I'm just like openly wondering, like, is there just like too much for the Heat to overcome? Like Terry Rozier's got this knee sprain, DeLon Wright, bringing in okay, Jimmy Butler's away. Nothing has quite felt right for them this year, even when they've had some things that have broken through, like Haywood Highsmith being interesting and Duncan Robinson adding new layers to his game all of a sudden. This team just like ultimately hasn't been very good, and there is also this nagging voice in the back of my head, Brendon, where I think about last year, and we had Wes on, and I think we asked him pretty point blank, can the Heat like make another playoff run? And he was just like, absolutely not. And then they made the fucking finals. So it's just like there's like this boogeyman fear around me. But if you look at the numbers, their offense is in the bottom 10. They're 18th in net rating. The defense has been good, like borderline top 10. They're also outperforming their net rating by about 3 wins. So, like, under the hood, I don't think this team comes out looking particularly good. There's not a compelling case to me in terms of the numbers that this team can be figured out. And then you throw in all the other stuff going on. And how much can you actually trust this team to actually salvage itself and be a team that can finish 6th in the East and not even have to be in the play-in? Or even if they are in the play-in, be a team that the 2 seed doesn't want to have to deal with in round 1, or Boston doesn't have to want to deal with in round 1.
Well, I think that fear from the opposing team in a playoff series is always going to be there. I mean, last year, if nothing else ever did prove it, last year for sure should have proven that, you can't overlook them. You can't underestimate them. And no matter what the number to the left of their team name on the ESPN scorebug is related to their seeding, and that doesn't really matter. But I guess, let me put it this way. So last season, game 1 of the playoffs, they go in to Milwaukee. Their rotation is this.
Oh, boy.
Hold on. This is not the box score of the game. This is the stats for the series. All right. Box score, real rotation players from game 1 last season. Butler, Strus, Vincent, Bam, Hero, Martin, Love, Lowry, Duncan Robinson. And over the course of that series, we would eventually see a little bit of Oladipo, and he got hurt. Obviously, Tyler Hero gets hurt. And very quickly it becomes Strus, Butler, Duncan, Bam, Vincent, Martin, Love, Zeller is basically their rotation. This season, we're looking at a rotation, assuming they stay healthy, of Robinson, Jaquez, Bam, Love, Josh Richardson, Caleb Martin, Jimmy Butler, Tyler Hero, Terry Rozier, or something. You know, they have DeLon Wright, who they just added. Nikola Jovic has had some interesting moments. We still have Haywood Highsmith on this roster. Caleb Martin still a factor. They're deeper now, right? And I think the defense is always going to be there. I think to me it comes down to, can Jimmy masquerade as the version of himself, the type of player he was all of last season, and of course especially in the playoffs? And can they figure out what the hell is going on where they're always worse when all these guys are healthy and better when they're not healthy? Can they actually have Bam, Butler, and Jimmy together on the court and be better than the sum of their parts? Because otherwise you're kind of like wishing for an ankle tweak or something, as weird as that sounds.
I absolutely would be. Whoever gets them on one should feel terrified. Like they just you should have just like the fear that Jason's gonna break into your house and get you. That's just how I think this works. Honestly, like Brendan, Bucks Heat just sounds like something we deserve, just for the fear factor, you know.
Mm-hmm. Do you like watching Miami? Even
No,
after last year when we all kind of learned how to appreciate them?
I mean, on a regular season basis, no, I absolutely do not. I don't think anyone really does. I don't think the Heat like watching the Heat, you know, but I think that's kind of the point.
With Butler, Bam, and Hero on the court this year, they're plus 2.7 per 100 possessions. It's not exactly what you're looking for with your 3 best players. No. You know, so, but look, I mean, to your point, last year, and as I walked through that rotation, it was bleaker at this time last year, I think, even with Jimmy playing awesome, than it is right now. So crazier things have certainly happened. But to me, I think the presence of a legit Pacers, a legit Knicks, even the Magic being an actual force, hopefully Cleveland not falling apart, I think the East is a little stronger, and that might be the biggest thing standing between them and another run like that. But we can stay in the East again here.
Okay, let's do it.
And go with how high can Jalen Brunson go? So I want to circle back because we mentioned the Knicks injuries a bit. I guess it came out today that Julius Randle is not ruling out season-ending shoulder surgery.
It's not great.
Not at all. At the same time, he was very hobbled last year in the playoffs, was not himself, was frustrated, not closing certain games, as we all remember. And nevertheless, they win 6 playoff games, push the eventual finals rep from their conference to 6 games and really compete well, I think, and then obviously just blow the hell out of Cleveland. So I obviously the Randle injury would be a really big blow, but they're really, really deep. They just keep adding stuff. Dante DiVincenzo's playing like he's Ray Allen. And I kind of think that wouldn't necessarily mean doom for their season. And that leads me back to the original question, which is, to me, this playoff run is going to be largely about Jalen Brunson. And you mentioned not betting against Miami. Obviously, they have much more of a track record there than Mr. Brunson does, but I am not betting against what this guy can do in any moment. He has more than proven himself worthy of that level of trust over the past couple of years as he's broken out in New York. How high do you think Jalen Brunson can go this year? How far can the Knicks make their run?
I think Eastern Conference Finals is super doable for them. And you could convince me that they're the team most likely to give Boston fits among the other top 4 teams in the East. I think I could get there with that. I haven't totally fleshed that out and thought about it enough to give you like a declarative answer, but my gut would tell me I think it's the Knicks. Just based on how they're tough as shit. They have all the pieces, they have the size, they're going to be physical. You could even, Brendan, like, I hate these arguments because people made them about Kevin Love for a long time and Chris Bosh for a long time. And Randall, obviously, I don't know if has quite ever hit the highs of those two guys. But there would be something that would simplify what the Knicks are if it's just like Brunson and his style, and you don't even have to, like, accommodate to Randall in some way. It's just like we got a bunch of big-ass wings who can shoot. Jalen Brunson and if you get Mitchell Robinson back in particular, bigs who are going to just rebound the shit out of the ball. There's a recipe there that is spearheaded by Brunson that would make the Knicks, I think, really interesting. So I think Eastern Conference Finals feels super doable. The only thing that I think separates the Miami thing you're hitting at and the Knicks of this year with Brunson and like him having his Jimmy Butler kind of run is Tibbs just isn't as good of a coach as Eric Spoelstra, and that's gonna matter at some point within this conversation. It just is. Spoelstra is the best coach in the league, and Tibbs just, I don't think we think of him in that capacity. Even if he's doing a really good job with this group. I don't know if he's gonna be like pulling all the right levers at the right times in the playoffs. If it came down to that being like a X factor of Brunson knocking off the Celtics or pushing the Celtics to 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals or something of that ilk.
Yeah, I think they don't match up well with Boston, so that's absolutely true. I guess to me it's like the Knicks don't need Eric Spoelstra because they have more depth, frankly, than last year's Miami team did. So it's a little easier to just kind of win with what you have. But definitely that I think if they ran up against the Celtics, I would probably pick Boston myself. Yeah, I guess just to go back in time a little bit, like Brunson had 25, 5, and 7 in game 1, 35 and 2 in game 2. He had a 32 and 11 game, a 38, 9 and 7 game, and then in game 6, which they narrowly lost to Miami, which I think we kind of forget, a road game 6 in Miami, he went for 41 on 64% shooting from the field and only turned the ball over 3 times. So better team, deeper team, more experienced team. It's year 2 in this kind of cauldron for him, and I would not put like a super low ceiling on the Knicks, even if Randall's thing is long term, even if they don't get Robinson back. I agree. The recipe they have here and how great he's playing will go a really long way for them. But what's your next one?
We're going to flip to the opposite end of the standings here for a moment because I feel like we need to bring him into this conversation. Are we going to see Victor Wembanyama more fully unleashed? Are we going to see Victor Wembanyama, who has been tapped out at most nights like 28 minutes or so? He's putting up absurd numbers in those minutes. I think he's going to win Rookie of the Year. I think we're headed there. Greg Popovich he said this a couple times, I think, but at least the most recent one I saw was he talked about maybe towards the end of the year, they'll raise his minutes a little bit. And we've seen Wembanyama, I think, grow over the course of the year. He very well could average 20, 10, and 3 assists a game, and if he stays under 30 minutes, the only other player in league history to do that is Joel Embiid. But do we just see him, whether it's minutes, whether expanding his capacity to do things we didn't know he could do? Does Victor Wembanyama just get fully unleashed, and what does that tell us about where he's going? His team is not going anywhere. That team stinks, and they're going to have a really high draft pick. But what does the rest of the year tell us about him and what he is ready to do maybe as early as next year?
Yeah, I don't think maybe everybody realizes, and I will admit, I asked you if you like watching the Heat. I like watching the Spurs less. So it's kind of
They're not good.
like it's like eating spinach or something to watch this team. But the under the radar incredible 20 games or so since January 1st that he's had is absurd. He averaged 24, 10 and 3 on 60% true shooting with a 37 usage in 14 games in January, and the Spurs were 4 points better with him on the court per game on average, which means that's a dog shit team that was actually winning the minutes he was out there. Think about how bad they were when he wasn't, and then in 7 games in February, he's at also 60% usage, 60% true shooting, slightly lower usage, but still 20, 10, and 4 in, as you noted, very, very limited minutes. So the production's there. I think we kind of are, and the efficiency, I think we're kind of like falling behind the Rookie of the Year conversation if we're looking at it as like, well, Chet is kind of, doing it in a winning fashion every day and really handling the workload and doing it efficiently, but Vic's just sort of out there doing his thing, chucking shots, playing, losing basketball. It's not really true anymore. He's being asked to do a ton, but he's actually succeeding. So I think he's earned a bigger opportunity when you kind of cut it up that way. It's just a matter of physically information we don't have access to, a plan of action we don't have access to as far as how to maintain. He did have those ankle injuries. It's not purely precautionary, right? Like he did have some tweaks and things, and you're always one wrong move, especially early in a career like that, from a serious problem. So I don't hate the minutes side of it as much as I really hated the lack of structure early on. And I think since they made those changes to the lineup and to the rotation, I'd be cool if he's able to kind of play the same role for the last 25, 30 games here, even if the minutes stay around 27, 28, maybe cap out at 30. That doesn't bother me as much, but let him do whatever he wants because he's kind of passing every single test they've thrown at him on the court.
Can I ask you just one follow-up to this before we go to the next thing? Does it surprise you, like, kind of, it's just occurred to me now, so maybe I'm just, like, off base here, but does it surprise you at all that Greg Popovich, the military background, known for his system, and what he did with David Robinson and Duncan and Parker and Ginobili, that this team for him has been so unstructured? Does that surprise you that like this guy, who I think in some ways is defined by creating structure and order, has a team that is so out of order at times?
Yeah, of course, but it's been that way for a few years now. I mean, I think it was like, wasn't it? I think it was Bill Simmons who got a lot of shit like 5 years ago for kind of stepping out of line and daring to criticize and not kiss the ring. But Pop's teams have not really played very organized basketball for a while now, and especially since DeRozan left, it's just been kind of further and further downhill. I don't know if he's doing... I mean, what's a developmental success story that you would point to since DeRozan left? Is there any guy that's really exceeded our expectations as a prospect that came into that organization? I'm not saying they've failed, but I don't think that there is one.
The only one, and they might have overlapped for a year, maybe not, but the one that comes to mind would be Vassell, has maybe exceeded expectations to some degree, but he was also a high pick.
Yeah, and you never really know with any draft prospect, so getting to the point that Vassell's gotten would have to be a big one, but...
That's it?
Even it's like, I don't really know what the winning version on a great team of Devin Vassell looks like. I don't think this season's gone the way I'd hoped for him. They have the ball in his hands a ton, and I guess that makes sense to try to develop that skill set, but it's not exactly working. DeJounte Murray, I think you would probably put on that list of guys that exceeded their draft position. You know, he's gone now, but I guess give him credit for that. I think Keldon Johnson feels really far from a polished ball of clay of a great, again, winning team basketball player to me. So I don't know. Obviously Pop will work there as long as he wants to, but I hope things trend upward when it comes to that. And maybe Vic being great on both ends, obviously that goes a long way to just getting the best out of other guys too. So it's not just about him, right? It's like this whole team needs some guidance. Maybe that comes more from Vic being awesome than it does from the head coach.
Yeah, this team could use if cloning was cool, Mike Conley would be like perfect for this team. And by cool I mean legal and like possible.
It is cool, right? Like lowercase c, whatever. It kind of, the idea of it's pretty sick. But yeah, I don't know how Mike Conley would feel about that. To your point.
Yeah. All right. There's no good way to transition. Out of that, honestly. Give me your next one.
Okay. Let's come to my backyard. Can the Suns avoid embarrassment?
Brandon, can I just tell you, I'm already preemptively worried about you. Like, second week of April, after April 14th, like that next 2 weeks, I'm going to just, like, once a day, you might just get a phone call, a little text from me, a $5 Starbucks gift card sent your way, just being like, checking in, bud. Making sure everything's okay over there. Particularly if it's, like, Nuggets Suns around 1, I'm just going to be checking in.
Yeah, I think it will be, is kind of how it's shaping up right now. But let me just start here as, like, a sub-question within my question.
Okay.
Do you just think it's stupid to even think of them as title contenders? Because I think there's I heard somebody who put it this way of like, there's really, and it was a Suns fan, and obviously that can be harsher than reality sometimes too, but they were like, there's really no precedent for a team with the season we've seen the Suns have, even with all the caveats you can make about injuries, to be this as a record, net rating, skew between offense and defense. There's really just no modern or ever champion that looked like this. And the season's not over, but are we kind of kidding ourselves to even put them in that group? Because the stats would kind of tell you we are.
I don't think we are. I mean, they're 8th in net rating, for one. You know, they have the 8th best offense in the league. The defense is above average. Which I think is a win considering the roster, frankly. I think there's going to be, I think they're obviously just that the core of this team is maybe a little more, because of the injuries, because of just the way they play, I think there is just a little bit of kind of lack of certainty with some of this, right? I think there is a little bit of that, but I don't think so. I think the biggest argument against them would just be how hard it is going to be for them to get there, just based on what kind of hole the injuries have put them in. Can I ask you, this is like a sub?
I think the biggest argument against them is that their defense is not very good.
Well, so this is my question. You would know this better than me as you think about this team incessantly. Last 2 weeks, Clean the Glass has them as the 6th best defense in the league. Couple points better per possessions than they've been on the year. Is there anything to that is real? Is that just like a hot run of defensive play? Like, is there anything where you've seen improvement or adjustments or anything that would let you think that, hey, they're going to be able to be good enough defensively, that things are trending in that direction where they could put together a really good couple defensive months and make a real run at this?
Yeah, so here's the thing is, I do think there's something to it because that trend goes much further back than 2 weeks. Since December 26th, which is like if you listen to Frank Vogel, that's when he thinks their season kind of turned around. They are 19-7 and 5th in net rating, 2nd in offense, and 7th in defense. So that's a 25-game sample plus where they are 7th in the NBA in defensive rating, 114.4. And I mean, the biggest thing that you would look at statistically within that is that they've been able to force more turnovers, which has always been a hallmark of Frank Vogel teams. They still let teams get to the rim. They're not getting a lot of shooting luck, which is nice, but I don't know. It's almost to me like I think the ultimate destiny for that team on that side of the ball is going to have to be somewhat gimmicky, right? Whether it's being really good switching in small ball lineups, or maybe rolling a little more zone out as the season comes to a close here, or, really just using Josh Okogie the right way for 15 minutes a night and having that sway those minutes your way for one reason or another, and surviving the offense on as that happens. Like, I can see all the numbers I want, but personnel wise, I think I'm still going to have questions about how good they ultimately are. They just don't have somebody to stop perimeter creators. They just don't. I mean, Okogie can't play enough for it to be him, and no one else really fits that description. So I think to answer my own question, and to look at that sample that I just listed off since basically the day after Christmas, I would say that I do agree they are still in the, maybe not the top tier of contenders, but right below that. And I think they absolutely can still win a championship. But the bigger picture nature of my question is, if they don't, and especially if they don't get close, you look at the way they've exited the playoffs the past 2 years with getting blown out at home, and the, I think, high level of doubt around the way this team was built, Chris, and I think they're going to kind of be the laughingstock of the league. They're going to be, who was it last year? Milwaukee? Like that's going to be the team that gets the Milwaukee Bucks 2023 treatment if they lose in even the second round, in my opinion.
It's staring them in the face, I think, just because of, Durant, I think, being who he is part of that. I think making the Beal trade is part of that. Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. I think it's just also they're just stacked in a very, it's just the thing that I will cut a lot of teams slack for, I think, number one, and maybe I'm just soft. Maybe I'm just not as hard as I need to be on teams. Like, maybe that's just it. The talent level is just so high that sometimes I'm just like, I kind of understand how we, end up with this, It's just like, sure, you're just gonna have kind of obscenely hard pass in
a series. Let's go this. If the Suns play the Clippers in the second round, just as a imaginary thing, where does the Suns' fourth best player rank among all the players in the series?
Not high enough,
right? Because it's like
the
Clippers have PG, Kawhi, and Harden. They also have Norman Powell, Terrence Mann.
I just like that you said PG first. That's just a very you thing to
He's higher on the list of, I don't know why, on Basketball Reference. I don't know how this is sorted, but he is. Okay. Norman Powell gets the top of the roster list on BREF. I don't know why. So yeah, PG, Kawhi, Harden. They also have Mann, Powell, and Zubats. Of course, the Suns' top two and especially in top three is going to be up there. But after that, it is an open question. And so, yeah, the talent is there. But I think they're going to need those guys to be so good, and that's asking a lot. But I think you have one more.
I do have one more. I had one that's actually the same as yours, but I'm going to flip it and ask, does any team just push for the tanking race in a real way that is interesting? Does some team just punt on the season? I want it to be should we talk about the top of the West? I think we kind of understand that the top of the West is going to be really competitive. It feels like the Wolves are in a really good spot to get the 1 seed. I'm not as interested as maybe as I should be in kind of how that sorts out. But I'm wondering if and I wanted to maybe try to shoehorn in a Lakers. You know what? We're gonna do the Lakers Warriors one because I want to put LeBron in a quote. That's good for the SEO. What happens with the Warriors and the Lakers this year that sets the stage for what comes next for those two franchises? What does the rest of the year with LeBron, let's say, and they finish in the play-in and lose and just are kind of bleh? What does that mean for him in his summer? And what does whatever the Warriors who are surging, who are showing us something, where do they end up? Do they have something in them, or do they also end up losing in the first round and end up in a weird these are two of the prestige franchises with prestige all-time great players that are facing really uncertain futures in varying ways. What does the rest of the year dictate for them as far as what comes next?
Yeah, let's just combine it then. To answer your original question, though, I think a lot of that gets decided at the deadline. So I'm glad we pivoted off because I think those were just going to be the teams. We know who it is already, who's kind of punting. But even before the deadline, I think Houston and Utah are my answer, right? Like they kind of decided, hey, there's no need chasing 10, and let's give some minutes to our young guys. Hey, Walker Kessler. Hey, Keontae George. Hey, Amen Thompson, Cam Whitmore. Like you're going to be in the real rotation again, and we're not going to, be feeding minutes to guys who are in their 30s anymore.
Can I say one Rockets thing real quick that I was thinking about when I was prepping for the show that I like sliding doors moment that I think worked out in their favor? Can you imagine if they'd actually gotten Brook Lopez this year and like not let Sengun just blossom?
I'm still not like incredibly convinced that they would have played those two guys together as much as the amount they were paying Brook would have made it seem like they should. I guess that's a really long sentence, but like the Steven Adams trade and some of the rumors around the guys they were pursuing that this year's deadline leads me to believe that they just really think they need a fucking awesome backup. Like, I don't think they would have signed Brook Lopez just to play 12 minutes a game. They would have had to play together somewhat. But maybe I'm just naive enough to think Sengun would have been so good that they would have been kind of slapped in the face. And like you can't really play Brook Lopez over him once you see what he's doing. You know what I mean? Because they obviously wanted to put the ball in his hands too, right? So it's like, to me, maybe I just think his talent wins out. And it's like, maybe they try that for a week and then they're like, okay, we'll pay Brook, but this is happening one way or another. I don't know. But I hear you. Absolutely. It still remains one of the weirdest rumors of last offseason that they even wanted him.
Just what are we doing, Houston? Tillman Fertitta, you must be contained, my good sir. What were you gonna say? What were you gonna say? Before I cut you off.
Well, I was gonna combine your last question with mine, which is, who is this year's late bloomer? And my answer to that is the Warriors. Last year, it was the Lakers, and then in the playoffs, they really, even went further than that, and obviously the Heat when the playoffs came around. But
yeah, they're like in their own category. They're like, who is going to be the second coming of death riding on a pale horse into town? That's the Heat. They're not a late bloomer. They're just death.
Yeah. And then you had some late fallers in terms of, I think, Brooklyn and Memphis and whatever else and the Clippers with Kawhi getting hurt and PG getting hurt. But so I think it's the Warriors this year in terms of their stock really being up. And if you were to ask me, who gets the 6th seed, for instance, I might say the Warriors. If you were to say who from the play-in could pull a Lakers or a Heat and they don't get that 6th seed, but they end up at 7 or something, I'd probably say the Warriors. I just think a lot of their indicators, they're 8-2 in their last 10 games. They have like the number 1 offense in the NBA over that post-Christmas stretch that I was referencing. Okay, it's 5th since Christmas. I think it's 1st since January 1st. And their defense has a long way to go. I don't know if they'll ever be able to buckle down enough to get stops consistently and get there. That's obviously kind of the inverse of what the Lakers dealt with. But to shoehorn it into answering your question, Chris, I would say, can they see enough from Kuminga, Podziemski, and maybe Moody that changes their plans? Because if we had asked this question 2 months ago, I think we would have just felt like this season was going to be a failure and they're headed toward a massive reset. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that's true anymore, but it could become true again if they don't actually become that late riser that I just called them and actually just perform in the playoffs or in the play-in more like a 500 team, which is what they've been.
Can I ask, as a twist on this question, I think everything you said is right. Is there a team that isn't the Warriors that you think could use the rest of this year as a catalyst for next year? Because I was trying to think of like who's a team that's like outside the playoffs that could have like a good end of the year run and build towards next year, and I can't really find a good answer.
Well, outside of the playoffs,
like or even like fringe playoffs, it's like, can Orlando like figure some stuff out? I just feel like their issues are more like, can we get a guard who can dribble and like be competent for us? That's like a bigger issue than what they can solve right now. The Bulls
I
are.
mean, I think Paolo being more efficient down the stretch of the season would be big.
That's a good shot.
Right? At a certain point, like his shot creation, it's going to stop becoming like a cool thing that he has that skill set to really, okay. We can all make jokes about how the on-off and the nerd stats don't do him justice, but like they don't lie at a certain point, right? So that would be a big one. And then I would probably point to those same two teams, Houston and Utah, that I did before. I would also say I don't know when Shaedon Sharpe is supposed to be back. I think he's supposed to play before the end of the season. Can we see if that Ant, Simons, Shaedon, Scoot lineup works? Can those three guys play together so that the Blazers don't have to make a decision on that without even any sample size of anything to measure it off of? So those would probably be my two. I guess I would say Orlando and Portland. But what are you looking at down the tunnel at for Golden State and the Lakers? What are you expecting from them this summer?
I'm much more optimistic about the Warriors. The recent Mark Stein thing about Klay Thompson maybe being on the Magic's radar has had me kind of like wondering like what is coming there and what like the end of the year could mean.
He did say he expects Klay to be back in that same piece, right?
Yeah, yes. But also like Podziemski and Kuminga, it's like what does this unlock for them for the next year as well? And like just even if they lose in the second round or in like a really tight first round series, what does that mean for those guys to get those reps and that experience, that feel, and does that set them up to be just like a team coming to kill the world next year? The Lakers, I'm just like, I know they've won 7 of 10. They're much better at home than on the road. 3 in a row before the All-Star break, all that stuff. LeBron has still hit some insane highs this year. I just don't feel like I know that this team has any forward momentum that I really believe. And that leads me just to wonder, like, okay, what is coming in the summer? Like, if you were to tell me one of these teams goes through like a seismic change in the summer, it feels like the Lakers would be the more likely one to have that not only just be in their DNA, but also feel like it is merited based on how the end of this year goes.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think they're what a crazy thought. They're going to be number one on all of our offseason radars. The Los Angeles Lakers. We never are thinking or talking about them. Good thing they're going to have some attention.
Yeah, small franchise that desperately needs it, you know?
Yeah, they're going to really benefit from the hype.
Yeah. The other team, Brendan, I thought about trying to talk myself into that I just can't quite do as far as a team that could ride a good end of the year and do something better next year. Well, I had 2 teams in the East. That's Atlanta and Toronto, and I just couldn't quite get myself there.
Atlanta was definitely on my list, and I think that they have, like, they're getting their offense back on track, and Jalen Johnson missed a lot of time in the middle of the year. He's been back for a while now, and I do think, like, we know the recipe works decently well. I know a lot of people have made this point, but that Boston series was much, much more competitive than it had any business being, and so if they were to be like the number one offense for the last 25 games of the year, would that floor you?
No,
wouldn't
I guess
floor me. So then
Yeah.
that can win that can win a play-in game. That can win a couple playoff games because they literally do it every year. So they almost feel like they don't count though for that reason. That's why I didn't include them.
Yeah. In Toronto, there's just like a lot of questions.
I don't think it's going to be Toronto.
No.
With all
There's
due
also
respect.
there's also just like a lot of blah. Like as much as there's a lot of really good talent in the league right now, and even good talent on like blah teams. I just like look at the bottom of the East in particular. I'm just like, what is going on here? Like who hurt? The Wizards, the Pistons, the Hornets are just like the triangle of crap. You know, like just a bunch of blah. And then in the West, it's like okay, the Spurs at least have Wembanyama. The Grizzlies, like, they'll get Ja and everyone back next year, and, like, you think they'll be ready to rock. Portland's got all the youth. So there's not as much, like, dread to me in the West, even if it's going to be hyper-competitive. And that conference next year is going to be fucking bonkers. Holy shit. The East is not that.
No, but the West is, I mean, we say that every year, don't we? So
No, but it's just, like, right now I look at 1 through 15 in the West, and I could tell myself something positive about every single one of those teams in a way that I feel I actually believe. I don't know if I fully believe I could say something nice about every team in the East and feel like I can actually believe it,
No.
It's tough times. Remember Marcus Sasser? Pistons really had a moment there with that at least. All right, we're going to end there on Marcus Sasser. Can't believe I did that. Brendon, we're going to miss you. I'm going to miss you for a week.
I am, gonna miss everything about my normal life, but I'm also very much looking forward to not living it for a week. So
I look forward to just hearing you be like, I talked to a random guy in a British pub about the merits of Devin Booker's footwork, and they're going to be like,
no, it'll be all about like the craft of Enzo Fernandez in midfield. I won't be bothering anybody with hoop. I'm gonna be, what do you guys think of Poch? All that stuff. That's all I'm really focused on.
Not at all worried about Yusuf Nurkic's on-off rating for like a week. It's really good for your mental health, I think, personally.
Yes, because the games also take place in the middle of the night there. So even like I'm literally boxed out of being able to care, even if I want to, So
yeah, looking forward to your to updates about the Drew Eubanks Isaiah Stewart situation too.
Just take it from Phoenix PD at this point. They're handling all further matters.
Yeah. All right, we're going to end there. I'm Chris Manning. That's Brendon Kleen. We'll be back next week. I'll be here with Wes Goldberg, State of the East, Miami Heat check-in, other fun things with Wes. So please tune in for that. Brendon will be back the week after that. Please subscribe or review if you haven't already. Check out our friends at Thrive Fantasy. Use our link below as well from our friends at Homage. Buy yourself something nice. And hopefully, Brendon, they have the most comfortable T-shirts you could get. Brendon could wear one on the plane and just be out asleep. It was flying across the Atlantic. But we'll tune in next week with more good basketball. Enjoy the hoops. The stretch run is here, folks.